So we're already on part 6. And I was thinking to myself that, I mean, you're probably not thinking this. This is just me overthinking things as I usually do. But I'm thinking, wait, why is this part 6 if we're only on ray 5? And then I realized this is part 6 because we had that introduction and that was part 1. So, but this actually, my obsessiveness around that particular thing speaks very well to what this particular ray is. This is ray 5. The name of this particular series is The Gate of Magic Science, Alchemical Change. And ray 5 has to do with concrete knowledge and science. So we are going to be very analytical with what we're going to do. And tonight in particular, I have it structured just slightly different than the way in which we have been proceeding all along. Not dramatically, but just a little bit different. Because I don't want to spill the beans too soon. I don't want to have too much coming in for this very first class. I want to just kind of pique your interest, if it will, and stimulate your thought process. So this particular ray, all of the rays, as we know, are correlates to our hearts and our minds, our bodies and our spirit, all parts of us. But I would say that of all of the rays, this one, just by virtue of some of the predispositions that you would find within the boundaries of this particular ray, is much more thought oriented. And I'll use the analogy that I've used for several other things. I like it. So I'm sorry if you've heard it one time too many, but I kind of like it. So here's what I want you to think about. A dancer, an artist, a musician go into their rehearsal space and they begin to create a composition, a piece of artwork, a piece of choreography. And they layer upon layer the different movements. They carefully select the music that's going to be used to amplify and express what that movement is without words. And when this is performed, or when the gallery opens, people come and they see this work sitting in the audience or browsing through the gallery. And the first comments that you will often hear are, this piece really makes me feel, fill in the blank, this way. You can really tell that this choreographer went through a lot of pain in their life. They must have had a lot of emotional upheaval going on in their lives, because the movement and the music that they chose and this, composition, particularly if you like, I'm not a big fan of piano music, but I do like Rachmaninoff. And I mean, everybody talks about Beethoven, but talk about Rachmaninoff. And if you've heard any of his concertos, I mean, talk about emotion. You can just feel it rolling off of you. So the key word there is feeling. And then after the individuals are struck by the feeling that is being evoked by these pieces of work, then you may hear something to the effect of, oh, I think that was really nice. I think they did a really good job. So when you're talking about things that are of the creative mind, that are not quite so literal, we often equate those more with our feeling nature. We often equate the things that are created and that evolve from that as being based from feelings, because rarely, and I'm sure perhaps this is, you could poke a hole in what I'm going to say, but I think rarely do you hear a performing artist as they are in the midst of creation come in and say, I think I'm going to do this movement here. I really think this is going to work. I think this is going to be so much better. It's usually, I really feel like I want to express this, and this is the best way that I can do it. So that's the one piece of that. And that falls, perhaps with the blue ray, the love and wisdom, or even with the green ray, the active intelligence. But that active intelligence is infused also with feeling. And very much so, it aligns with what we just finished, which is the yellow ray, the harmony, the beauty, and the art. This particular ray is concrete knowledge and science. So here is the other scenario. So the scientist goes into the lab and they're all fired up about what it is they want to accomplish. They have a goal in mind. I am looking for a cure for cancer. So the scientist goes into the lab, works collaboratively, takes all the data, does all the research, thinks and thinks and thinks, ponders over the results, ponders over what can be, thinks about it some more, possibly even has some sleepless nights because he or she is thinking so strongly about how to create, again, it's creation, create something that will be effective. This could also be the scenario for an architect. This could be the scenario for a professor. So they work and they work and they work, and they bring together into a think tank all of the great minds to come up with a solution. Lo and behold, they find the cure. They go to the press conference because, of course, everyone is so excited about this. And they're asked, how did this come about? And the lead scientist says, well, I was thinking that there should be a cure if you add this molecule with that cell and you put these together in a very specific way, because certain types of cancers respond to this and respond to that. The outpouring from the community is one that is dumbfounded, first of all, because depending on how technical that scientist got, and if it was, a press conference for lay people, it might have gone completely over their head. And then the outpourings of love and emotion begin to flow. The scientists are contacted by people because of what they've stimulated at the heart center within them by their thoughts, in gratitude for saving their child's life, their mother's life, their brother's life, their friend's life. And it is at that point that possibly the scientist, even if the reasoning for doing this was because that scientist had a family member or a close friend who, who died from cancer that they were trying to cure. When they go in the lab, that's not what is the directive. It can't be, because when you are talking about something that is relying on concrete, predictable, or unpredictable results, emotion gets in the way. Emotion gets in the way because then sometimes you see false hope, or you see false positives, or you see, even worse, false negatives. And your emotions are overcoming you. So you have to be very clear-headed, very present, very analytical, and very thoughtful in what it is you're doing. And once that thought process is accomplished, Then it leaves the space of opening, because remember I said to you, all of the rays are a composite of everything. Then it leaves the space of opening for emotion. And oftentimes with great breakthroughs like that, when you read about the individual, you will read perhaps, or if it is in more modern times when, something is recorded, they'll break down at some point and get very emotional about what it is that they actually accomplished. Not necessarily from a place of hubris and pride, false pride, but because all of a sudden it really hit them, what they had done and what impact that was going to have. So, what we're going to be working with for these next few weeks is that analytical, critical thought process that weaves together the magic that is inherent in science and the science that is also inherent in magic as well. So we have our little course syllabus here, what we're going to be going over each of the weeks. That will be, as you know, in a separate document that will be sent to you as well. Let's take a nice deep breath now, and as we have done in the past, I'm going to share with you what it is that I thought would be appropriate for tonight's class in writing. The logical conclusion made can be proven by the varied experiments I've applied to the topic. I have tested my conclusion thoroughly and completely using both analytical and anecdotal evidence. This process began modestly as a hypothesis, and once captivated by the ephemeral nature of what I was trying to ascertain, I became completely and utterly obsessed with drawing a concise and completely objective conclusion to the matter. I employed all of the rigors of standard and methodology, as well as exploring the more nuanced and organically intuitive research modalities. What have I concluded? My conclusion is that what I think I know of myself can be concretely be proven to ultimately be disproven. And what I can scientifically prove is subject to further testing for its validity. Furthermore, I have concluded that this is a lifetime study that may well extend into the next lifetime or any other subsequent to this. It is in those realms that my conclusions are subject to change and may wholeheartedly prove to be false after future trial. In other words, I am continuously evolving. So beyond the typos there, which obviously I wasn't clearly analytical about when I typed this, that's the feeling that I want to have going into this. And not that I need to draw your attention to this, and some of you may already be aware of the fact that sometimes I get a bit wordy about things. As my husband sometimes says to me, I tend to sometimes go on and on and on, kind of, it's like you opened a fountain and you mentioned one tiny little word, and then, I've got to give you the whole encyclopedia definition of what that word means. That is a failing I feel that I have. So I appreciate your forbearance with that. But I purposefully made this very wordy and very detached, clinical, analytical, and maybe not even very welcoming, because you could get lost in some of the ways I kind of went with those run-on sentences. But that's exactly what this is all about. And the key takeaway from this is that you can do every and any type of analysis, experiential experience, experiment, anything, and apply it to anything. And the bottom line will be that you will always, 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 always be able to poke holes in it. Whatever it is, you are always going to be able to find some areas where there is something that doesn't feel completely true. That is not a failing, because the goal is not one of ultimate perfection, because there is no such thing as ultimate perfection. In fact, there is no such thing as perfection of any form. Even the stories that we know, the scientific evidence, the mythos that we know about the beginnings and the creation of our universe, of our solar system, of our planet, of our world, even of ourselves, how we are created. There are elements of falseness in there. There have to be. It is truly a law of the polarities, in that it may not be glaring, it may not be even enough. You know how when you are looking, really scrutinizing food labels, and let's just arbitrarily say that you're looking for products that contain some sort of sugar, and you're looking for something that has potentially less than, not even a full amount of something, but less than. And the way that a lot of manufacturers can get around certain things, additives, preservatives, you fill in the blanks, that are in our food, is that there are certain criteria that are set in terms of what is the threshold that is allowed for that ingredient to be in a product. So you can come very close to that. It could still contain that ingredient, and they do not have to disclose that. Does it make the product any less viable, especially if it's already a good product to begin with? Not really. It would be nice to know what's in everything that you're eating, everything that's in there, but that's impossible because, okay, so not to get gross or anything, but unless you could go into the factory and see that it's been sterilized, wiped down, the machinery that's being used and everything, the thought process that something is continually going through the gears and the mechanisms of the machinery helps to keep it clean. And so there's nothing, because there's nothing settling and nothing that is allowed to decay, is another false thing. Because no matter how fast and how frequently that machine is running, there is going to be something in there that potentially is going to get into your food that's not great. Will it hurt you? Probably not. If you knew about it, would it skeeve you out? Yeah, probably. Just like if you've ever watched those shows where they show you everything that's living on your skin and your body. And, I personally maybe saw one of those, and that was really enough for me, because I know there are things crawling all over me, even though I shower, I bathe, I scrub. I mean, but I know there are things that are on me. Do I need to know what they are? No, they fall in that less than percent, unless they get overwhelming and cause me to be sick. So when we are striving towards perfection, that is why I am saying there is no such thing, which means that what we try to do is we try to mitigate and minimalize those things within our control that we can be aware of. We try to minimize those things that are not productive for who we hope to be and who we actually are, but we just need to remember that process. So this particular ray is totally about that work. It's not about poking holes in the energy and in the viability of magical practice and work and spiritual paths. It could be. You could actually, if you're working on new magical tech, you do actually want to poke holes in it to make sure that what you are formulating as a new technique to be used is actually going to be something viable. But in any case, you know, what we are striving to do with this particular ray, the intensity and the directive of this particular ray is one that allows you to break things down. The beauty of this ray is also in the fact that it has only been until recently that science has acknowledged and has actually verified things that we have been aware of as intuitives, as magical practitioners for centuries, things that we already knew. Science is finally proving that there is a possibility of something more. So that is the work that we are going to be doing with this particular ray. And for those of you who were in the first class and we did all of that, those different practices, exercises of finding your different rays for the different parts of your being. So I'm sure it will not come as any surprise to you that my primary ray happens to be this orange ray. Concrete knowledge and science happens to be my primary ray, and it also shows up in a couple other places when we were doing the monad ray and the soul ray and the astral ray and all of those things. So I'm sure that some of you who know me, well, even those of you who don't know me really well, but have taken classes with me, could probably vouch for that. I am a living, walking orange ray. There we go. I'll just get that out there. All right. Course syllabus, that will be in your separate handout. We are going to talk a little bit about it tonight. Oh my goodness, Gina. I wasn't sure what that was. It's a tail. I just kind of saw this little thing reaching up and I thought, okay then. Expectations and goals. So of course, because this is the one that is the one, I have, and its topic, I have a few, I added maybe 2 more things than what we would normally do, or rephrase them a bit. So expanding your awareness. All of these are about expanding your awareness, but I want you to, as we move through this, I want you to fully embrace your thought, your mental, your intellectual capacity and processes, which is also to some degree contradictory to a lot of classes of this nature that are more about feeling good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. About the feeling nature and what do we intuit and all of those things. See, this is why I could not be a politician. I could not be in the public eye in a big way because I have no reverence. And it's very clear from my face and my tone exactly what I think about things. No, this ray is all about embracing this, what goes on in here. It's about embracing uncertainty and challenging it. Like the scientist. When the scientist has an experiment, or the professor is preparing a class, or someone is preparing for their dissertation or their thesis, there is great uncertainty in all of those things as to what the outcome is going to be, and sometimes even as to what you're really even going to present that's going to be supportive and substantiate whatever it is that you want to put out there. So that's the uncertainty, and then the challenging it is by not being put off by those things that you come across, not being put off by things that you think either you are not capable of or things that you think, and I'm purposely trying to avoid the word feel, or those things that you think are not going to be helpful to you. Crossing the threshold of what you know. So that is very important when you are striving towards concrete knowledge and you're running it through the same parameters of a scientific exploration. Being able and knowing that you are going to cross through thresholds of what you know, which also means that you are going to be stepping even further into uncertainty and you are challenging it. Because remember what I wrote and I read to you about, the conclusion is that regardless of what I know, there's some falseness in all of it. But that's also the beauty in it too. I don't want you to think of that as a negative thing. That, quite frankly, is the beauty in it, in that it leaves open the possibility for new growth and for something else to evolve from what you already have as a foundation. And then offering up the space of testing and rendering something more. So they kind of flow one into the other. When you are able to see outside the box and see beyond what the norm is, see beyond what the standards are, then you can open yourself and allow yourself to embrace the uncertainty of what those unknowns may be, and then challenge what you perceived or what you thought they were versus what they actually are when they present to you at any given point in time. When you do that, you are actually crossing through that liminal space, that threshold of what you perceive yourself to know, because you have to leave behind sometimes those things that you think you know in order to actually more fully expand to those things that you could know. And remembering those things that you already did know. And once you are able to do that, then the only other ingredient here is finding your laboratory, offering up some space within yourself, within your time, within all aspects of your being, to be able to test what your theory is, test what your hypothesis is, and then rendering and remaking it into something that's more than what it was when you first began this process. So that's what the expectations and the goals are for us with this. So it's a little more proactive, I guess we could say, with this one. It's less about the feel good, and it's more about clearly stripping it down and just leaving exactly what it is that you wish to learn more about. We're going to do our experiential now, the initiation of the fifth gate, as we've done before. So just take a moment to set all of your things aside, settle in, get comfortable. And let's just begin with a series of fourfold breaths. And as you're breathing, I want you to keep your eyes open. As you're doing this breath, I want you to look around. I want you to take in everything. I want you to look at the image on the screen and just allow to arise whatever it is that begins to arise for you. Let's take a nice deep breath to start and a nice full exhalation. And breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Rest. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Pause. Calm, serene. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. Settle in. Deepen. Connect. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Pause. Exhale. Sink deeper. Breathe in. Lungs expand. Full. Complete. Pause. Rest. Full. Complete. Exhale. And rest, settling deeper, deeper, and deeper. Let yourself sink as deep and as fully as you can into whatever space you are in, and whatever is supporting your body, whether it be floor or chair. Breathe into this space. Envision the swirls of breath rolling out from you, circling back around a circuitry. Inhaling deeply, filling all the state of your being. Feel the energy now swirling about you. Your eyes and your gaze are softened. You may have closed your eyes at this point. All is swirling in and around you. Take a moment, flutter your eyes open, and look at the image on the screen. We've used this image before. The nautilus, the inner chamber. Each could be a doorway, a threshold into another realm or state of being. Each could contain a new mystery, continually moving, swirling in and reaching out. The energy reaches out to you now. You feel enveloped in it, and you place your awareness right at the very center of this nautilus shell. It spirals and it coils on and on and on, and it gives you a sense of spaciousness, of infinite possibilities. You move a little deeper still, and in this movement, the energy and the weaving, golds, yellows, reds, all come flooding in to your space of awareness, each scribing its own path, each creating a wave of vibration, each creating its own geometric shape and pattern, and all of it being very organized, very structured, very composed in how and what it presents. It all coils and swirls, and the patterns and the shapes dissipate, and they become long threads of swirling patterns that are like paint palettes. Tender leaves and petals, and spaces that are hidden and spaces that wish to be explored, all still with a certain sense of structure, of order, of composure, and all waiting for the analytical mind to explore all of the nuances, all of the crevices, all of the variations of tone and color, of space and form, of structure and outline. You breathe deeper still, and you see a light, a multi-petaled light emerging from the very center of this space. It beckons to you, it flows open and shut, and open and shut. The weavings of the patterns, the delicate nature of the strands, the orange, the red, the greens, the blues, and at its core, at its center, a brilliant light and a space of threshold and crossing. You extend all of your energy and all of your awareness out towards this central space. You are uncertain of what you will find there. And you may also have some trepidation that what evolves may be something that is challenging to what you normally are used to encountering. But you very quickly settle into the intention that if this is what is to be, then bring that challenge on. That you are ready, that you are capable, that you are able to move through it. And so you breathe into this space of opening, and each of the tendrils, the delicate points of balance, flutter with this vibration, with your energy, and you move your awareness right through the center point of that light. You cross into a space that opens out for you that is complex yet simple in its structure. There are geometric patterns. There are sigils of hermetic symbology, some of which you are familiar with, others you have yet to peel back and reveal. You have stepped right into the center, the nexus, the place of cohesion, where scientific thought and idea and principle commingle with those things that are of a more ephemeral nature, shall we say. You find yourself looking here and there at what is surrounding you, and you know that this is just barely the tip of the iceberg. Take a moment now and just rest in this space. Allow your gaze to soften. Allow your eyes to soften. And just take in the imagery that is on the screen right now. Take a few deep breaths now, feeling yourself completely and utterly immersed. Soften your gaze and place your awareness even more deeply into this image on the screen. You've stepped through the other side. You've entered into the realm of knowledge, knowledge that is born of experiment and trial and error. Knowledge that has been tested throughout the aeons. Knowledge that awaits your energetic signature to awaken it, to enliven it. Breathe deeper still into this image. Take a moment now, close your eyes once again. Acknowledge the image, the imprint of that image on your inner screen. Even if it's only momentarily, it doesn't matter. It's been imprinted in your mind, in your thought processes. Breathe into that space, holding the intention. The intention that you will reawaken, having crossed this threshold now. That with all of your actions and intentions, you will test them. You will seek for deeper understanding of what those things are and what they mean to you. You will find the lines of connection, for there are many, my friends. And with each seeking and with each connection that you make, a new path is opened. A new threshold beckons you to step through. And the alchemy of the change that you will experience is one that you will feel in all levels of your being and in all parts of yourself. Take a deep breath in now. And as you exhale out, just allow your awareness to come back to my voice, to come back to this place, the space of understanding. Take a few more deep breaths, and with each of the deep and deepening breath, you look more fully at the room that you are in, the space that you've chosen for this work. And now you see with clear eyes. You see that there are many things in that space to be explored, to be tested, to be tried. Take a few more deep breaths, each one bringing you closer and closer into the physical realm, into your physical body, and back to the sound of my voice. Sigh into a few of those exhalations to signal that your body, that you are ready to return to do the work. So mote it be. That was a deep one, huh? Yes, concrete knowledge and science are heavy, heavy weighters. That threshold, the energy of that orange ray is enlivening and uplifting, but it is also very dense and very thick. So yes, if you have water, this would be a really good time to have something to drink to hydrate yourself. While you are coming back, and as I assist you with that, with my blah, 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 we're just going to talk a little bit in the overview of the course about what we're going to be working on. Next week, we're going to talk more about concrete science in terms of your left brain, your right brain, where that place in the middle is, the strivings to coalesce the creative and the analytical sides, the mind and the heart, if you will, and what that space is in between, and how we can network with it in moving along that midpoint to draw the best from each of those things. And then we're also going to talk about what we think we know. And I would like us to be very candid in our discussion of that, and not feel shy or embarrassed to make a statement of something that we think we know something about. It's not a test. You're not going to be tested on it. I'm not going to plan the next workshop with you teaching it, because you said, hey, I know this. It's more for you to hear it, because even if you are working in an area that you consider to have some expertise in, we often forget to give verbiage to that. We often forget to say, well, I know this because, well, there are a lot of reasons for that. Depending on what the setting is, you don't want to give your clients or the individuals, your colleagues that you're working with, the perception that you're a know-it-all. So sometimes we tend to avoid using that word know, because we're not sure how it will be taken depending on what the setting is. Other times we feel very comfortable in making a declarative statement about something that we know, and somebody bursts our bubble. So here's a perfect example that I will give you. I teach a lot, as you know. I have taught and I teach in a lot of public settings as well. And I can almost always predict, regardless of what the subject is, that there is usually somebody who's going to be there who wants to challenge whatever it is that teacher, whomever the teacher may be, has to say about a subject. Partially, I think, because they want to prove that they know either as much or they know something more than what that teacher has to offer. And, I'm game for that. I am always up for learning something new and, constructive criticism of something that I might say or whatever. But when you teach, after a while, you begin to develop kind of a second sense for the ones who are just doing it just to be annoying. And the other issue is that if you don't shut it down, sometimes it can be very distracting to those individuals who are there who really do want to learn and don't want to learn from someone else who was in the audience or participating with them. And that's why they chose that particular class, was because they wanted to hear what that teacher had to say. And I have encountered that a couple times, not too many. And I credit it partially with the fact that I don't leave a whole lot of room, as you all know, for opening, for interjecting anything, because I tend to speak quickly. I take one breath at the beginning of an hour-and-a-half long presentation, and then I don't breathe until I'm done. And then I ask if there are questions. But even with that methodology, I have had a few people like that. And it's very disconcerting, because then it also puts you in an awkward position of, how do you handle something like that? You don't want to be unkind to the individual. You don't necessarily want to call them out in front of other people, unless they're just absolutely being a jackass. And then, there are a few things you can say to completely shut them down. But, generally I tend not to do that. I try very, very hard to steer clear from doing that, because I don't want to embarrass someone, regardless of what their intention is. So it's really important, this particular, and we're going to do this next week, this is really important. So the reason why I'm giving you this information and this background is because I'm kind of preparing you for the fact that I would like you to share, and it doesn't have to be anything spiritual, it can be anything. I know a lot about how to can vegetables or something. I don't know. It can be anything. It does not have to be spiritually oriented. But I want us to feel comfortable, and I want us to share what it is that we perceive as being an area that we know enough about that we could feel comfortable saying, I know this, or I know something about this. And then we're going to kind of put it through the test of also, well, how do we feel about this? Because there's always that piece to it as well. I can make a statement that I know a lot about the Hermetic Kabbalah. And I feel I know enough. You see, I use that word feel. So I got my emotions in there. I feel I know enough to teach it. So why would I teach it? How would I teach it? What would I teach it? What is it that I really know? Who's interested? And where would I use this? These are important questions to ask yourself, because they all kind of burgeon from that aspect of the gnosis of knowledge itself. The gnosis of knowledge is being aware of what it is you truly do know, and you can claim as something you know, at the same time that you are fully aware that you say you know something, but there's still a lot you don't know about that thing. The next week we're going to look a little bit more at putting things through the lens of, if this were an experiment. So thought, how does thought play into that? How does feeling play into it? And with experimentation, what are we experimenting with, and what are we experimenting on, more importantly? And we're going to write out a hypothesis. Sorry, but this is going to be like school. Yes, I told you. Very dry, very clinical. We're going to write out a hypothesis. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to that thing that you said you knew something about. And we're going to put it through a test, a little bit of a test here. And then through this work, and through using that work, we're going to talk about, what is the gnosis of scientific application? Where does that point come about? Does that point ever come about? Where you just intuitively flow with what knowledge you have around that perceived subject, without having to think too much about the preparation for that thing, or without having to think too much about, how it's going to be presented, or what the outcome is going to be. When does it become part and parcel of who you are and how you move through the process of analyzing something while truly intuiting it as well. And they can be very good bedfellows. They are not at extreme ends of the pole. And then finally, the last week, we're going to look at the gnosis of magic. What does that mean? What is real? What isn't? What is imagined? What isn't imagination? And we'll talk about, as we've done with the other ones, we're going to, since orange is a secondary color, we're going to look at orange and its energy with the red ray and its yellow and the yellow ray and how it works together. And we're also at this point, because we really only have 2 more rays to work with, we're going to bring everything that is above that, you know, the red, the yellow, but then there's also the blue and green, which flow in there as well. And we're going to bring all of that together and pull that together into drawing a conclusion. So we're going to have our brainstorming or our thought process about bringing to the surface something that we know, that we identify with as knowing something about that thing. And then we're going to formulate a new hypothesis around that thing, experiment a little bit with it, extend a little bit with it, see what we get from it. And then we're going to bring it into the realm of magic, whether it is magic or not. Because remember, 365, 24/7, that's our mantra. That's our rah-rah, if you will. 365, 24/7, we walk this path. So magic and mundane actually are all mixed in there together. Most often it's really difficult to unravel and extricate the two, even though we tend to want to have nice little parcels of, this is my spiritual time, this is my magic time, this is my mundane time. They're all mixed up, people. Sorry, but as soon as you put one foot, one toe, one intention on this path, you already set into motion. That's the scientific formula. You already set into motion the fact that everything was going to weave in that direction and in that directive. This is what we're going to be working with as we move through. And I wanted to spend a little more time this week on these particular things so that you could have a very clear picture and idea and thought process of what's coming up, because this is going to be a lot more interactive than some of the previous ones have been, and I want you to be prepared for that. So the 7 rays, our slide that I have kept in here and will keep in here for all of them, just as a, and one of the reasons why I'm keeping this definition, I mean, by now you know, theosophically, they are 7 major types of light, substance, spirit and matter, waves and particles that compose the created universes. Universes. That's not a typo there. There were typos before. But that extra S on the end, that's not a typo. There are multiple universes, as we know. These are also believed to convey divine qualities. What I want you to think about now, we're thinking from the concrete analytical mind. What we are talking about, these rays, we could create a hypothesis and go so far as to make a statement that these rays are sentient energies. Sentient in that they are alive. They are filled with pranic energy, life-giving energy. Not just concepts or anthropomorphic clothing or ideals or fill in the blank for what makes sense to you. At this point in our studies, I hope that, and I invite you to perhaps agree with me or align with me in that these are truly sentient energies. Why are they sentient energies? Because they are directly impacting and interacting with us. And the interactions that these energies are having, and hopefully, especially since many of you have gone through a lot of the rays now, most of the rays that we've come through, you are feeling the impact of those rays. You are, even if it's just simply that you are more consciously aware now, that in and of itself is a sentient response to, and in reciprocity to, something else that is sentient, that is stimulating it. So these rays are not just pretty colors, pretty faces. They're not just pretty faces and pretty colors. They are impactful energies that impart light. Aren't we sentient beings? And would you not agree that we are beings of light? You know, every time I say that word beings, I feel like if I overemphasize it, it sounds weird, but if I don't, it sounds to me like I'm saying beans instead of beings. I'm in a really weird mood tonight. I'm sorry for all these little side things. That's what happens when too much analysis comes into play. You got to play with it. Anyway, spirit and matter, waves and particle, light substances. Are we not light substances? And would you not agree that we are sentient beings? Well, if these are major types of that light substance, then these rays are sentient energies as well. I'm not going to say beings because they're not quite that category, but they are sentient energies. They are alive, they have purpose, they have directive, and they are quite intelligent. If that is your primary definition of sentience, they are quite intelligent. All right. So we have this ray 5, the orange ray, concrete knowledge and science. And I wanted to just kind of jump ahead here. You know how we've usually, and we'll do this a little bit next week, but it's kind of interesting. In the past classes, our very first overview were the excerpts that I took from the 7 Rays and from the Principles of Man book in order for us to get a better grip on what that ray is trying to express. And I selected in the ray that is the most analytical and, you know, would have been the perfect setting for doing that. I decided that it didn't feel right to do that this week. And maybe not even next week. I'm not sure. I will probably pull some extracts from it, but I'm not too sure I'm going to use too much from that. But it did feel appropriate to just simply take a look at what the orange ray is comprised of. And we are going to do this at the end in a little bit different format. But I went back in and I used the keywords and the archetypal energies that aligned with the other 2 rays, the red and the yellow ray. And I want us to just spend a few moments looking at these and how they relate to one another. So ray 5, the orange ray, this could be the scientist, the studious one, and the mind. And when I say the mind, well, for a long time, I thought it would be really cool just to be like, what would it be like just to be like this brain, this big mind? Not really concerned with everything else, but just this mind, this head. and it would contain all information, able to receive everything, from everywhere and anywhere. So when I say an archetype of the orange ray is the mind, I am speaking of the mental processes that occur intellectually at the levels of consciousness. I am also talking about the brain itself, the physical brain, and what the brain is able to do in terms of our bodily functions, in terms of the neurological interface. And so the mind feels very appropriate as an archetype for this orange energy. Some of the key words: driven, obsessive, analytical, and skeptical. They sound very negative, but they aren't. Remember, semantics here. Semantics, I like to play with words, aren't always what they seem. Someone who is driven, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if that individual allows it to consume them. Because when you are driven about something, often that is the active byproduct of passion for something, a desire for something so strong that you extend yourself beyond the comfort zone of just being satisfied with the basics of something. You want to be, or to have, or to explore something more. Being obsessive about something sounds really negative, but not really, because if you're driven, you often do begin to obsess over something. And again, it becomes negative if it's not used correctly. Obsession can get you really far with accomplishing things that perhaps you thought you never were going to be able to accomplish. Perfect example, every, and I'm not even just going to say great, because that's very limiting. There are many, many people, creative people, who are not, in the Forbes 100 or on the charts as having the #1 hit, or in the theaters, or, whatever, on stages. Being driven enough to push yourself to become skilled and accomplished at playing an instrument to your satisfaction, or maybe even playing it for the enjoyment of someone at a wedding, or even just simply playing it for the enjoyment of a loved one. You have to be obsessive about it in order to perfect that. So yeah, I did use that word perfect loosely, all right? But in order for it not to sound like it's squeaking with whatever it is that you're playing. You also have to be very analytical about it, because you have to know exactly where it is that you need to give a little bit more of a push. If you're playing a string instrument, you have to know just the right places to place your finger. You have to know just the right amount of pressure with your finger. You have to know how to be loose enough with your bow arm. You have to know how to use that bow arm. I played violin, so I'm using that as the example. And you have to be skeptical. You have to have a healthy sense of skepticism, because skepticism is what moves you to greatness. If you are complacent, you'll be right where you are. You're not going to move forward. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, okay? So let me be very clear about that. I'm not making any judgment. But what I am saying is, if you are wishing to advance, evolve, progress, grow, move forward from where that place where you are comfortable is, you have to have a certain amount of skepticism. Because if you don't have a certain amount of healthy skepticism or healthy criticism, then you're not going to be able to see the illusion that you're creating, that you should be in Carnegie Hall when you're just really beginning to learn how to play the scales fluidly and in a matching tone with what it should be. So that's the orange ray. Ray 1, the red ray. In the red ray, the self is sacred. It is the governor, and it is sensitive to self. Why? Because we realized that the red ray is all about will and power. Oh, that knee-jerk response to that word P, power. Power is a good thing, people. And hopefully by now you are really realizing that. When you are feeling powerful, you are stepping fully into the mantle of who you should be. And when I say stepping into the mantle of who you should be, automatically that means that you are not encroaching or not diminishing who someone else should be. You automatically know how to stay in your own lane, as they say. So it is self-governing. And that is a really important thing. I know self-governing can go really wrong when we equate this red ray with power that it has gone to hubris and has gone to a place of dictatorship and malignancy. But that's not what its natural state is. And the only way that we can arrive at the realization that we are indeed powerful people, instead of moving through life diminutive and being lesser than, is if we are self-governing. And that's where the conscience comes in. The ethics and the morals and the morals and the mores come in, is how we self-govern ourselves. When we are able to say enough is enough, and when we are able to say, no, I need to stand firmer and stronger, and I need my voice to be heard. That is also the place of rootedness, standing your ground. And when you are self-governing from a place that is anchored and rooted in good foundations, not fodder, but good foundations, then you become power-filled. Not powerful, but filled with the divine power that is inherently yours. Ray 4, which we just moved from, the yellow ray, we see the seeker, the harmonizer, and the conscience. So this is where the conscience actively comes into play when the red ray is trying to find its place of power. It is actually that infiltration of the yellow ray, or think of the sunlight, that is coming in to really show clearly those areas that need a little bolstering or a little shoring up. The yellow ray is also the place of the seeker, seeking to find something beyond the status quo. We talk about harmonizing things, which is not equal pans on a scale. It is about one pan being heavier than the other, and then the exchange and reciprocity when it is necessary of something coming from that heavier pan to inform the lighter one. And then the scales tip. It's not about everything being right at the same level. With that, keywords are moody, because it takes a lot of shifting back and forth, and it can produce a lot of anxiety when you are trying to navigate this. It takes the ability to be changeable, and it also takes a fair amount of organizing, so that when you become moody, and that moodiness becomes the point of changeability for you, or flexibility. So think of the snake that is ready to shed its skin, and I'm sure that it is not comfortable right before all that happens. It can't be. I mean, I'm not a snake, but I would imagine that it can't be a totally comfortable process. And if that serpent were able to express itself, it might be moody. It might be in a bad mood, like, oh, here we go. Another shedding of the skin. I feel horrible. I feel gross. I'm all scaly. Not much I can do about it and everything. But in order, for the change to happen, the mood has to change. Something has to change. But it has to be in an organized and a structured way. So my task to you would be to find, this is the scientist, all right, to find the places of commonality. I gave you some hints, I gave you some clues, but it doesn't mean anything coming from me because this is mine, it's not yours. It needs to be yours. So I would like, if you are able this week, I would invite you to go back and look at this particular slide and these words and just see how they possibly inform one another. I don't know, maybe they don't. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you at all. There is no right or wrong. It's your perception. I believe that there are some threads of commonality there, but I want you to be able to either see it for yourself or to concretely put it through the test for yourself and be able to say, maybe they relate, but I'm not really too sure. Okay? So our questions that we have that we're going to be working with for next week. So far, and I hadn't actually intended that last one to come into play, so I'm going to write down for myself about finding the points of commonality in that one slide, and I'll put that as a reminder as I have done with the questions, on our page. Just give me a moment and I just need to remember that I ask you to do that. Okay, so the questions that we have for this week. So this is about who you are, right? And I want you to really think about what that means. Think about, how and what about you, and what are the things that you consider to be true about who you are. And I want you to select one thing, just one thing. So don't make it overly complex because you're going to analyze it. So don't make it a big, complex thing. Just select one thing that you consider to be true about who you perceive yourself to be. Then, some things I would like for you to ponder. What do I believe about myself? And why do I believe this? So, that thing that you chose, what is it? And why do you think this is something that is true about you? How can you prove it to yourself? And that's a question we often omit. We come up with all these truisms for ourselves, but then we don't really think about, well, I work really hard to prove that what I think is true of my, let's just say, behavior. I work really hard to prove to other people that I am consistent with the image that I am projecting. Well, how do I prove it to myself? Like, shouldn't I prove it to myself first and be more concerned about me actually believing it before I try to go out of my way to make other people believe it? And I will say this is a convenient hack that we get ourselves into, especially, and this is also why for many people, to do effective shadow work, this is exactly what trips them up, is the fact that they center in on all these things that feel comfortable to say they are uncomfortable in talking about. Okay, did you catch that? They focus on all of those things that they are comfortable to say that they are uncomfortable about themselves. And they completely omit those things that would completely prove to themselves that this is something truly you should feel uncomfortable about and need some shadow work done with. So, how can I prove this to myself, that this is something that I believe about myself? And what do I know once I have figured out how I'm going to prove it to myself? Then what do I know is false in that belief? I have to prove it to myself first before I can see where the holes are in that thought that I have around the truth of who I am. But then, and yes, I know it sounds like a round robin and a loop and, whatever you want to call it. But then how can I test this false belief too? So it's not just, and as you know, in any scientific process, even if you have to go back to when you were in elementary or high school, you know that you have to prove what is negative as equally as you have to prove what is positive. So that is what you are doing with that first group of questions there. And then just because I could, and I wanted to make it another little layer there for you, things to explore. So these are things that I want you to explore once you've gone through that whole other dialogue. How quickly did you come to a conclusion and statement? Meaning, how quickly did you come to a conclusion about what it is that you selected, that you truly believe about yourself? Did that happen instantaneously? Was it on the tip of your tongue? Are you thinking about something right now as I'm talking because, oh, it's so easy to find something because, yes, this is it? And the statement that you chose around it, how quickly did that happen too? And then, was this conclusion easy or difficult to arrive at? So that might sound like a redundancy, but it's not. Because I may have come to a conclusion quickly about something, but when I take that next step in asking, well, was it easy or difficult to arrive at that? Even if I came to it very quickly, it might have been a jarring thing for me that normally I would not allow myself to be that vulnerable about. Does that make sense? Or it might be something that I do feel vulnerable about it. It took a little while for me to come up with it, but I knew at the very onset. It was easy for me because I knew at the very onset that this was going to be a difficult and challenging one for me. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. I don't want you to obsess over this. There's that word. I don't want you to obsess over this. I'm trying to give you loopholes, and I'm trying to encourage and invite you to see the Swiss cheese, for want of a better word, and because I'm a little hungry because I didn't have time to eat anything. I want you to see all of the permutations, and the training in this, the goal in this, is for you not to just give things a quick glance, but for you to really, and you don't have to spend an hour with anything. You can develop yourself enough that even just a minute with something, you can say wholeheartedly that I did put it through all of my little filters. And you know why? Because these filters become intuitive within you when you start doing them routinely. You go through them in a millisecond. It's like I had explained to you, I think, one other time, and it's actually a scary thing, but you know how when you know a location and a drive so well that you leave from Upper Darby and you end up in Georgetown, Delaware, and you really don't remember the particulars of the drive and it seemed like it went by in a blink of a time. I am not endorsing that type of driving, but I am saying it's the autonomic responses that we have in life to a lot of things. And these can become equally automatic for you to just quickly breeze through. They're going to take some time initially because you're not used to doing this with things, and it's going to seem overly analytical, and I can hear all of the excuses now, and that's fine. No judgment, no judgment at all. Because if nothing else, even if you are complaining and griping about how long it's taking and this is annoying, what did it do? It gave you greater awareness of something that's annoying you and that takes a bit of time. So either way, it's a win-win, right? So you got to look at it from that perspective. Or I would hope you would look at it from that perspective. So we have our questions for reflection, we have the things to ponder, we have the things to explore. I will also add just that little thing, and we won't spend a lot of time on it. It will be probably more, the finding the commonality, the threads between the three rays. It'll probably just be whoever would like to say something about it, one of those deals. The questions we are going to spend a little bit more time on, and we are also going to decide what it is we're going to use for our hypothesis and everything next week as well. All right. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.